I'm Ethan, a 30-year-old returning grad student in Ohio, and how I fell in love, safely, slowly, with my teacher, Dr. Daniel Hart. It's a story about boundaries, breath, and bravery, told gently for anyone who needs steadiness tonight. We met in autumn, beneath fluorescents and library lamps, finding patience. If this gentle, honest journey helps you breathe easier, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support safely guides others home. When I walked into the evening seminar at Westlake University in Columbus, the last thing I meant to bring with me was my heart. I was 30, a former EMT easing into a second career, the kind where you measure progress in paragraphs instead of pulses. The course was called Narratives in Health, and the instructor, Dr. Daniel Hart, was already writing his opening expectations across the board. He had silver at his temples, the kind that looks earned, not manufactured, clear, steady voice, practical shoes. He greeted each of us like it mattered that we arrived, and somehow, despite all those chairs, I felt seen. As a paramedic, I had learned to listen for breathing. In that classroom, I learned to listen for meaning. Dr. Hart asked us to tell a story about an ordinary object that kept us going on our hardest day. My hand surprised me by rising. I talked about the pen tucked in my ambulance jacket, cheap plastic borrowed from a diner, and how every signature on a patient form felt like a promise to show up fully. He nodded once, then twice, like a clinician confirming a pulse. "We'll be gentle with each other," he said, "but honest." And we were. That first night I slept better than I had in months. It was not love, it was relief. Someone was finally speaking a language I understood. Care, clarity, and boundaries, all in one sentence. Before the second class, Dr. Hart sent an email to everyone. Plain words, no fanfare. Some of you may be returning students balancing work, caregiving, or health transitions. I will keep expectations clear. If anything becomes heavy, please step outside, hydrate, or email me. Our learning community must be safe. As someone who once measured safety by checking oxygen flow and seatbelt clicks, I appreciated that kind of clarity. It didn't feel stiff. It felt careful, like someone placing a hand on a doorknob and opening slowly. On the third week, he introduced an ethics case, teacher-student relationships in higher education. He spoke calmly about conflicts of interest, power, and trust. He told us, without drama, that if anyone ever developed feelings in a direction that complicated the classroom, the right move was to hold the boundary until after grades posted, then talk like adults. No romance during enrollment or evaluation. It protects everyone's dignity. Hearing that was like an extra seatbelt. Something clicked. It let the room breathe. I didn't know that clarity would become my life raft. I only knew that when Daniel, Dr. Hart, guided a discussion, I felt my shoulders drop. It wasn't the ease of a crush. It was the steadiness of a lighthouse. Even lighthouses are beautiful, but they are built for safety first. The ambulance was a good life until it wasn't. I loved the nights alive with sirens and purpose. I also knew the cost, sleep fractured, holidays missed, the quiet grief you carry home when your patient list turns into initials. After my father's stroke, I moved closer to my parents and enrolled in grad school. My goal was small and specific: learn to help health systems tell the truth kindly, so patients and families could understand what was happening without drowning in jargon. Being a 30-year-old student meant I packed lunch like a dad and kept ibuprofen in my bag. I wasn't expecting a crush. I made checklists, not playlists. But love does not ask permission. It just sets a chair near your desk and waits. Daniel never tried to be charming. He was simply present. When I asked a question, he paused as if to make room for the whole answer, then offered one sentence that fit like a splint. My best friend Maya, an oncology nurse from Cincinnati, texted me after week 4. "How's the class?" I typed. "It's helping," she wrote back. "Helping how?" And I stared at the blinking cursor. Sometimes the body knows before the brain signs off. It was raining the night I knew my heart had rerouted. Daniel arrived late, not flustered, just damp, like someone who walked instead of sprinted. He apologized for the weather, as if he could do anything about it, shook the water from his coat, and started class with a breathing exercise. Feet grounded, shoulders easy. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6. The room steadied. He spoke about how clear language reduces fear the way oxygen reduces panic. Then he read a paragraph from a memoir. A son helping his dad with physical therapy, counting out loud. Something inside me softened. My father had the same therapy, same counting, same stubborn humor. Daniel closed the book and said, "When we speak calmly, the body listens." I wrote it down, underlined it twice, and felt the center of the room tilt. This was not a crush built on distance. It was respect, becoming tenderness. On the way out, he stood by the door, thanking us for the discussion. When I reached him, he said, "Ethan, your example about consent in chart notes, that was clear and kind, exactly what we want." I nodded, suddenly thirsty, and escaped into the rain like it could hide my face. By week 6, I knew 2 things. I cared for Daniel, and the boundary mattered. He had given us the rule, and I respected it, for him, for me, for every student in that room who needed a fair teacher. So I kept my seat in the second row. I sent precisely 1 email per assignment, each with a specific question and a thanks. I never lingered after class. I paid attention to classmates who were brilliant and kind, and I took notes like I was building a bridge. Crushes can be fireworks. Mine was more like the way morning light finds a kitchen table, patient, gentle, harder to ignore each day. I told Maya finally. She called immediately, her voice practical and warm. "Is he single?" she asked. "I have no idea," I said. "Are you in danger?" she asked, meaning danger to the standards we respected. "No, the rule is the rule. It's a lighthouse. I'm not docking a boat in a storm." She laughed that good, relieved. Laugh only nurses know, then said, "Okay, you keep the boundary. Let the semester be the container. When grades post, if you're still feeling it, you talk. Once it's equal footing, equal footing." Those words became a rhythm for my feet on the cold sidewalk home. I booked office hours to talk about an essay, not about feelings. The essay described a hospice nurse teaching a patient to practice saying goodbye in small, manageable sentences. I wanted feedback. Daniel welcomed me into his office. Plants with honest dirt, 2 chairs, and a bookshelf of dog-eared texts. He offered water. I accepted. My pulse remembered I was alive. "Your writing is precise," he said, "and you protect dignity. Consider adding a moment where the nurse asks permission before touching the patient's hand. Show consent in motion, not just in policy." He looked at me the way a good clinician looks at a chart, for patterns, not just problems. "And Ethan," he added, "your instincts are excellent." I breathed, counted 4 in, 6 out. "Thank you," I said. He glanced at the plant by the window. "Grad school is a season," he said softly. "Keep your body kind. Good work grows where there's rest." I left that office with practical edits and steadier lungs. The boundary held. Respect grew inside it like a garden behind a fence. On Sundays, I drove to my parents' bungalow in Worthington with soup and small errands. My mother set out placemats shaped like leaves year-round because they made her smile. My father, steady since the stroke, completed his arm exercises while watching baseball on low volume. After dinner, Mom asked about school. I told them about readings, the way stories can guide treatment decisions, and the professor who ran our class like a well-staffed clinic. Clear roles, clear compassion. I did not say, "I think I'm falling for him." Instead, I said, "I'm learning new ways to speak kindly under pressure." They were proud. Dad said, "You always had a good way with people." Then he winked and added, "Tell your professor thanks for giving us our son back on Sundays." It felt both simple and complicated. Love rarely arrives convenient, but it can arrive respectfully. If you're listening and feeling something similar, respect, tenderness, attraction, towards someone who has power over your grades or job, hear this. Boundaries are protective devices, not punishments. They keep stories clean and futures intact. Hold the line. Let time do its careful work. If the caring is real, it will still be there when the door opens ethically. If it fades, it will do so without hurting you or anyone else. Both outcomes are grace. I kept repeating that to myself like a prescription. Refill as needed. No generic. Substitution. Midterm papers were due on a Tuesday. I submitted mine and went for a walk around Mirror Lake to slow my brain. The leaves were crisp, underfoot, and inside me. The next class, Daniel returned our drafts with steady pen marks. Mine had suggestions, yes, but also 3 words written at the end: clear, compassionate, courageous. It felt like the first time someone described me the way I wanted to be seen, not just the way I performed. After class, I almost stayed to say thanks, to ask about a citation, anything to linger near that warmth. But the boundary is not just a rule, it's a muscle. You exercise it, you keep walking. I texted Maya instead. She wrote, "Proud of you, hydrate." I did. Water can be medicine. In late October, Dad had a dizzy spell. Nothing catastrophic. Dehydration, the urgent care doctor said, but it shook me. I emailed Daniel to ask for a 1-day extension on a reflection paper. I kept it sparse. Family health. Brief delay. Thank you for understanding. He replied within an hour. Take care of your father. Extension granted. No penalty. Health first. That night, while I refilled Dad's water and reset the alarms on his pillbox, I realized this. What I admired in Daniel wasn't mystery. It was how he made care ordinary. No flourish, no performative kindness, just the sort of steady grace that keeps families standing. By the weekend, Dad felt stronger. I turned in the paper and slept like the house itself had exhaled. Campus quieted. I drove south to see Maya and her wife Priya in Cincinnati for a short Friendsgiving. We cooked too much and ate even more. Over pie, Maya asked, "Still steady?" I nodded. "I can care without crossing," I said. Priya, a therapist, smiled gently. "That's a good sentence," she said. "Care is not the same as action. Let it be information, not instruction." She refilled my tea. "Also, be kind to any lonely parts. They're trying to protect you by wanting." We played cards, we did dishes. We drove around looking at early holiday lights. On the way back to Columbus, the highway sounded like rain even when the sky was dry. I put on a playlist titled Steady and practiced out loud gratitude. For my parents, for work that mattered, for teachers who kept boundaries, even when it would have felt easier to blur them. The last week arrived the way winter does in Ohio, crisp and unmistakable. Daniel reviewed our projects and reminded us about extensions, academic integrity, and the evaluation form we'd complete after grades were submitted. He thanked us for honest discussion. Then, with the same clarity he'd started with, he restated the boundary. As always, if anyone needs to discuss personal matters that could affect grading or dynamics, email me and we will route it appropriately. By policy, I do not meet one-on-one about non-course topics until grades are posted. He smiled, kind and matter-of-fact. That sentence did not disappoint me. It steadied me. I turned in my final project, a case study about redesigning discharge, instructions for clarity, and walked home past storefronts that smelled like cinnamon. Every cell in my body seemed to know a shift was coming, but I would wait for the all clear, like the professional I had been trained to be. Grades posted on a Friday at noon. I checked mine, felt relief, then closed the laptop and stood at the sink holding a glass of water like it was a ceremonial object. It wasn't fear, it was respect. The rules had done their job. I could now be a person, not a student in relation to Daniel. I drafted an email, edited it 3 times, and kept it short. Dr. Hart, now that the course has concluded, I want to express gratitude for your teaching. If you're open to coffee sometime as fellow adults, I'd value a conversation. If that's not appropriate, I understand completely. Thank you for an important semester. Ethan. I pressed send and went for a walk in the cold. Every breath felt like clear air, moving the past out and making room for whatever came next. That evening, a reply arrived. Ethan, thank you for writing with such professionalism. I'm glad the course served you. Coffee would be fine with a few caveats. I do not discuss grades or student specifics, and I am careful about perception in our community. If you're comfortable meeting in a public place this Sunday afternoon, I'll be at Juniper Coffee at 2. Warmly, Daniel. I exhaled a laugh. That sounded like relief getting promoted. Sunday at 2, I arrived early and picked a table with good light. Juniper Coffee smelled like chocolate and rain-soaked coats. Daniel walked in wearing a navy sweater and the same practical shoes. He waved in a regular person way, not a professorly one, and joined me. Thank you for meeting, I said. He smiled. Thank you for honoring the boundary. That matters to me. We ordered drinks. I told him about my father's progress with therapy and my volunteer shifts at the clinic. He told me about a dog he fosters on weekends, a grey-muzzled beagle named Scout who prefers couches to walks. We laughed. The conversation was not a surge. It was a gradual tide, coming in without knocking anything over. When the moment felt right, I said, I have feelings for you. I kept them respectful during the course, and I will keep them respectful now. If you're not available or not interested, I'll leave with gratitude. Daniel folded his hands. I appreciate how you've handled this, adult to adult, he said. I am single. I care about ethics. If we spend time together, I want a pace that keeps everyone safe. We'll avoid settings with current students. We'll be clear about boundaries with colleagues. And if either of us feels uneasy, we'll say, So, he paused, I'd like to get to know you. I felt something inside me sit down the way you sit after standing a long time. Not collapse. Rest. We didn't rush. We chose walks by the Scioto River, grocery runs, and outdoor art exhibits. We talked about books and family, about the way medical forms can become friendlier, and how grief is a river you learn to wade, not dam. Daniel listened the way good people listen, with his eyes, with silence that made room for the whole story. He asked about my year on night shifts and how I slept now. I asked about his decades teaching and what he still wanted to learn. He said, Humility doesn't arrive with tenure. You have to invite it every day. Once at a farmer's market, a former student stopped to say hello. Daniel introduced me as my friend Ethan. The word friend fit comfortably. It didn't rush anything. That afternoon, he texted, Thank you for understanding the extra layer we navigate. I want this to be kind to everyone. I wrote back, Me too. Slow is a kindness. At home, I wrote a list titled, Why This Feels Healthy. Clear communication, no. Secrecy, matched values, mutual pace, shared respect for community. My pulse stayed inside its normal range, not a soap opera, not a secret, just care moving at a safe speed. 2 weeks into seeing each other, I brought up the power conversation again. We sat at a park where geese complained about everything. If you teach a course I need, I'll choose a different section, I said. If scheduling forces overlap, we'll disclose to the department and step back. Daniel nodded. Yes, and if the university ever needs a statement, I will provide one. Transparency protects us and the students. We agreed that care without clarity becomes confusion. Care with clarity can become love. We also talked about faith, politics and dishes, because you can learn a lot by how someone treats disagreements. And forks. Daniel rinsed his mug immediately after tea, which I found endearing. I told him I leave mugs in odd places when I'm writing. He laughed, confessed he leaves books open to the page like paper tents. "We'll need coasters and patience," he said. Patience I could do. Healthy beginnings do not mean perfect ones. One evening, after a long day, I sent a text that read more clipped than I intended. Daniel replied with a simple, "Can we talk by phone?" I called. He said, "I want to check in about tone. It's okay to be tired. If you need space, say so. If I misstepped, tell me." No defensiveness, no drama, just curiosity. I apologized, explained the day, and thanked him for asking instead of assuming. We both took a breath. Conflict didn't have to be a siren. It could be a conversation. When we hung up, I wrote a single sentence in my notebook. I want a life where repair is normal. One Saturday, I met Scout, the beagle with the noble commitment to couches. Scout sniffed my shoe, accepted a treat, and promptly fell asleep with his head on my ankle as if we'd signed a treaty. We walked the neighborhood slowly, 3 careful hearts in a line. Daniel invited me to a board game night with his longtime friends, 2 librarians, a physical therapist, and a pastry chef who brought lemon bars that tasted like a sunny afternoon. They did not treat me like a student. They treated me like a person Daniel cared about, which is to say, with warmth and good jokes. On the drive home, Daniel said, "I think they like you." I said, "I like them back." Then I told him something. "True, I like the life you've made." He squeezed the steering wheel lightly, considered his words, and said, "I like the life unfolding with you in it." I slept that night with windows cracked, the room full of honest air. I have been out since 22, and Ohio has been both kind and complicated to me. Daniel came out in his late 20s. We talked about what the word gay has meant across our lives, sometimes banner, sometimes whisper. We talked about safety, allyship, and the quiet ways families learn each other again. I told him about my grandmother, who once said, "I don't fully understand, but I love you," which turned out to be enough. He told me about a colleague who kept a small pride flag in her office year-round so students knew they were not alone. When we said the word gay together, it felt like placing a hand on the table, palm up, nothing to hide. It was not the point of our story, but it was part of our language of care. Naming things is a kind of medicine. In January, after the new semester began, one I took without Daniel as my instructor, we decided it was time for Sunday dinner at my parents' house. Mum fussed over flowers. Dad practiced an extra set of arm raises like he was training for hospitality. Daniel arrived with a blueberry pie and a steady smile. We talked about baseball, local parks, and the dog who preferred couches. No one made it a production. It was simply 4 people sharing food, telling stories, and checking if anyone needed more water. After dishes, Dad pulled me aside. "He's solid," he said. "Kind. Listens." Mum squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "I like him." I breathed in, breathed out, and learned this. Sometimes love is not a trumpet. Sometimes it's a well-set table. In late February, my father had a routine scan that revealed a complication, treatable but requiring a short stay. I packed a small bag with socks, phone charger, and his favorite crossword. In the ER, a resident spoke quickly, kindly, and with too many syllables. Old habits woke up inside me. I stepped close, palms open, and said, "May I reflect back what I'm hearing to be sure we understand?" I slowed the words. My father's shoulders loosened. The resident thanked me and matched my pace. We left with a clear plan and less fear. After Dad was settled, I texted Daniel a brief update. He replied, "With you in thought, hydrate, breathe. You're doing beautifully." He did not rush to the hospital or make it about himself. He respected our family space, and in doing so, gave me strength. When I finally slept in the chair by Dad's bed, I kept hearing Daniel's first-day sentence, "We'll be gentle, but honest." That sentence had become my own voice. Spring arrived like a whispered yes. Daniel and I kept dating with the same steadiness that carried us from classroom to coffee. We planted a few herbs, took Scout for unambitious walks, and learned each other's families like new favorite songs. One evening, under a navy sky, Daniel said, "I'm proud of how we handled the beginning." I nodded. Me too. We respected the work, and it respected us back. If you are listening inside your own complicated caring, perhaps for a teacher, supervisor, or mentor, let this be caution and comfort. Hold the boundary like a handrail. Seek counsel, trust time. Keep your kindness aimed at everyone your choices touch. When the power dynamic shifts, speak clearly, name safeguards, and go slow. If it's real, scrutiny won't shake it. If it fades, it was information doing its job. Tonight my kitchen light is very warm. Scout is snoring. Daniel is reading, feet tucked under the couch. I'm grateful. I'm steady.